Alright, so in this video we want to look at the following concepts. What is an algorithm? What's pseudocode? What are code comments and how do we go about writing those comments in our code? Basic arithmetic operations within C++, and also we'll look at the concepts and ideas behind type conversion and integer division. So let's talk a little bit about what an algorithm is. An algorithm is just simply a set of ordered instructions that produces a desired result. You could also think about an algorithm as just being a recipe for doing something. So we could think about a recipe for making cereal. You know, getting the cereal, getting a bowl, getting the milk, pouring the cereal into the bowl, pouring the milk onto the cereal, getting a spoon, and then eating the cereal. And that's a very basic algorithm, but hopefully you get the idea of what we're looking at here. And it turns out that in program development, this is where you'll spend a lot of your time, is devising the algorithm to solve some particular problem. You may be trying to figure out the shortest path between 2 points, or maybe how to navigate through a maze and get a proper solution there and the most efficient way to navigate through a maze. So early on, whenever you're learning how to program, you are going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out the syntax and maybe solving different errors that pop up from the way you've coded something. But later on, once you become proficient at a particular programming language, where you'll spend most of your time is in designing and developing the algorithm before you actually implement that algorithm in a specific language. So algorithms are, language independent, doesn't really matter. We can just work it out on a sheet of paper before we actually go and start coding something up. So that's the basic idea behind an algorithm, set of ordered instructions that produces a desired result, or we can simply just say a recipe. Okay, so for the other topics that we're going to be looking at in this video, comments, pseudocode, basic arithmetic operations, type conversion, and integer division, we'll look at as we solve this particular problem here. So this is the problem statement we have. It says we want to create a program that displays the average scores from Metacritic's Metascore and Rotten Tomatoes Tomatometer for a particular movie. The average score must be displayed on a 10-point scale. The movie title and scores will be inputted by the user. So this is our problem statement, our basic requirement specifications for this program. And based off of that, we're going to devise an algorithm, and then we'll implement the actual C++ code. So let's get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with program 3. So we'll come here to File, New, and then come across here to C++ Project, left click, and we'll name this project Program 3 since this is our third program. Under project type, you can leave it as empty project, tool chains, make sure MinGW GCC is selected, and then click on Finish. Okay, so we've got our Program 3 project folder. You can right click on that, then go here to New, and then left click on Source File. So we want to create a C++ source file, and we'll just name it program3.cpp, and then click on Finish. Okay, so now we have our Program 3 source file, and we're ready to start typing in some things here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is paste in our problem statement. You won't be able to do this, but maybe you can type in a brief summary or just a little bit of text here, because I'm going to show you how to create a comment in Eclipse. I'm going to go ahead and paste in our problem statement that we saw before, and then I'm going to select all this text here and then hit Control, while holding down the Control key, hit the /, and that creates a comment out of all this text here. Okay, so what exactly is a comment? A comment is just simply text within our source code file that we as humans, developers, other people that may be looking at the code can read, but it's going to be ignored by the compiler. So when we go and compile program3.cpp, any line that starts with this // is going to be ignored. It's not going to try to compile that into some machine code. So what do you traditionally find in comments? You'll usually find maybe a description of the program, what it does, maybe the author, the date that it was created originally, maybe the last date that it was modified. And also you'll find comments associated with certain portions of the code, maybe explaining why a particular calculation was used or a particular factor was used in a calculation. that maybe is outside the norm. But it's not going to be a comment explaining, every single line of C++ code and what it does. The code itself should be self-documenting, so someone that understands how to write a particular program in a particular language would need to have an explanation of the syntax, but they may need an explanation of why a particular calculation was used or how the algorithm may work in general. So that's the basic idea behind comments. It's just some sort of text within our program source file that's for us, providing maybe a description or further explanation of something, and it's going to be ignored by the compiler. Okay, so let's take a look back at the problem statement and try to devise a basic algorithm for our program. So we need to create a program that displays the average scores from Metacritic's Metascore, Rotten Tomatoes Tomatometer for a particular movie. The average score must be displayed on a 10-point scale, and the movie title and scores will be inputted by the user. So traditionally, whenever we first start analyzing a problem statement or some sort of requirement specifications for a program, is to figure out the inputs that we're going to have. So it looks like we have 3 different pieces of information that need to be inputted. One is the movie title, and the other 2 are the scores, one from Metacritic's, the Metascore, and another one from Rotten Tomatoes Tomatometer. So once we have that information, then we can calculate the average score, and we may also have to condition that score so that it fits on a 10-point scale. We'll see what Metascore and Tomatometer scores give to us, and then from there we can worry about our scaling. All right, so now let's look at trying to just sketch out the basic algorithm without actually writing any code. So we'll come here and say, well, the first thing maybe we need to do is get the name of the movie. And then we also need to get the Metascore. So I'll say get Metascore. And then we need to get the other score. So get the Tomatometer score. And then we'll get the average, or we'll calculate the average. So we need to get the average of those 2 scores. And then we may need to do some rescaling. So we'll just say rescale average. And then once we've rescaled the average, we're ready to actually display the new average, or display it. So we'll just say display the result of our calculations, maybe. And that's basically it. So all this stuff here is a description of our algorithm without actually writing any C++ code. And what we call this is pseudocode. So oftentimes whenever you're in early code development, you want to just sketch out what you want to do without actually writing any specific code. So this just gets you thinking about the problem. Okay, so now that we have our pseudocode in place, let's go ahead and start actually writing some C++ code. So we'll go here below the problem statement and put in our #include statement. So #include IOStream is going to be the first one that we include so that we have support for getting input from the keyboard and also doing output to the screen. We want to have support for the string data type, so let's include string. And let's also do the using namespace standard, save us a few keystrokes. And now we're ready to start typing in the main function. So int main open paren close paren, and then we'll put an open brace here and then come down below and put a close brace. So now inside of this main function we still have all of our pseudocode, and I'm going to just tab the pseudocode over. Basically anytime we have an open brace, close brace, anything inside of that should be coming over 1 level of indentation. So I'm just using the tab key to tab all this over. Okay, what we're going to do is start filling in the blanks here, filling in this section below each of the comments. So in order to get the name of the movie, we're going to actually prompt the user of this program to input the movie name. So the first thing we need to do is actually declare a variable that's going to be able to hold the name of the movie. So I'm going to just introduce a data type of string, or variable of type string, and we'll call it movie, and we'll set it to the empty string. Okay, and then we'll display to the user using our cout and ask them what is the name of the movie. Okay, and we can put a colon space \n for new line character, and then a semicolon at the end here. Okay, so now that we have the prompt for the user to enter in the name of the movie, we need to be able to read in input from the keyboard. So usually what we've done is just use cin and then the extraction operator and then specify the name of the variable where we want to store that input. Unfortunately, this cin and then the extraction operator is only going to get the first word of the movie. So if it's a multi-word movie title, we're only going to get the first word. So we need something else besides what we have here. And we can make use of a function called the getLine function, and that will actually get an entire line. So what we have to do is specify two arguments to this function. So the first argument is going to be where we're getting it from. So we're going to be getting it from the character input stream or the keyboard, so we can just say cin. And then where do we want to store it to? So that's the second argument. So the second argument is going to be movie. That's the variable that we've declared previously, and we want to store whatever the name of the movie is into that particular variable name. All right, so that's pretty basic. This is our first time that we've actually called a function. So basically, in terms of calling a function to make use of it, you specify the name, and if they have any arguments that have to be specified, those are specified within the parentheses here. Okay, so we've got basically all the code that we need to get the name of the movie. And now we'll come down here and get the metascore. So the metascore is going to be an integer value. So we'll just declare an integer variable, int, and we'll just say metascore is the name of the variable, and we'll initialize that to 0. And then we'll have some output to the user. So cout and then the insertion operator. And we'll say what is the metascore rating for, and then we'll come in here and use our insertion operator, use our variable called movie, and then maybe question mark /n for a new line character. Okay, so this is just a prompt that we're going to have, then the input the rating from metascore. And then once they've done that, we can then read in that value. We can go back to using our cin in this case, since it's just a single value. It's not going to have any spaces or multiple words or anything like that. So we just type in metascore here. Okay, and it's going to be very similar down here for the tomato meter score. So it's almost the same exact lines. We'll just change up the variable name and a little bit on the string literal that we're going to have there. So we'll say int tomato meter, and we'll assign that to 0. And then we'll do cout, use the insertion operator, and we'll say what is the tomato, let's capitalize that, tomato meter rating for, and then we'll use movie, and then we'll put in a question mark /n for the new line character and a semicolon. And then we'll actually read in a value from the keyboard. So cin, extraction operator, and then we'll use our variable tomato meter. And that's basically it. So at this point in time, we've got the input for the name of the movie, we've got the score from, or the rating from Metascore, and we also have the rating from Tomato Meter. So we've got our input, and now we can actually go in and calculate our average. So in these next couple of lines of code that I'm going to write, I may make some mistakes on purpose, and then we'll come back and look at it. But oftentimes, in terms of learning something, if you exhibit the problem first and then come back and correct it, it's more impactful in terms of getting things right later. Okay, so how do we go about calculating the average? So the average is just going to be the summation of some values and then dividing by the number of values that we have. So a pretty basic calculation. We'll need to have a variable to actually store the result of our calculation. So we can think about just a basic expression. What are we wanting to do? We're wanting to take the Metascore and the tomato meter score, add those up, and then divide by 2 since there's 2 scores there. So we can think of maybe an expression like this: Metascore plus tomato meter, and then we want to divide by 2. Now we have to be careful here with this division here. We have to remember our order of operations. So we know that we do anything in parentheses first, then we do exponents, then multiplication, division, and then addition and subtraction, working from left to right. So the way it's specified here would actually do this division operation before we did the addition. We actually want to sum these values first, so we should probably put parentheses here so that we construct parentheses around some particular operation that we want to do before some other operation to override the operator precedence of multiplication before, or excuse me, division before addition here. So we do what's in parentheses first. And what we need to do is assign this particular calculation here to a variable. So I'm going to just assign it to an int variable called average, AVG, and make sure that our statement ends with a semicolon. So we have a valid statement here in C++ to calculate the average. Okay. The other thing that I'm going to point out here is that Metascore and Tomato Meter, they both offer values that are on a 100-point range as opposed to a 10-point range. So this is where we need to rescale the average that we come up with from a 100-point range to a 10-point range. So basically we're taking whatever value we calculated here and we're going to have to divide it by 10. So down here under rescaled average, I'm going to declare a new variable, and we'll call it rescale, maybe rescaled score. Maybe that's a good variable name. And we'll take the average that we previously calculated and divide it by 10. So that rescales it onto a 10-point scale. Then for displaying the result, it's just going to be a cout. And then we'll say our calculated, calculated average on a 10-point scale for, and we'll put in the name of the movie here, and we'll say is space, let's see, and then put in the variable rescaled score. All right, and then we can put a period here at the end. If you prefer, you can put this on multiple lines, so anytime you see this insertion operator here, you can hit return before or after the insertion operator, and it'll just put it on the next line. So that way our line is not too long. That's our last bit of code that we need to have. One thing else that we probably should do is have this return 0. If we don't put that return 0 in there, it will be okay by default. Main, if you in C++, if you don't have a return statement in there, it will default to a return 0 statement. You may end up with some sort of warning from whatever editor or whatever integrated development environment that you're using. Okay, so it pretty much looks like we're ready to save and build our program. But before we do that, let's go ahead and calculate what the scaled average would be on a 10-point scale for a particular movie if we were to use the Metascore and the Tomato Meter score. So we want to be able to come up with a particular test case, see what the value would be, and then when we run our program, we can test our program against the value that we expect to receive. So I've already pulled up a movie here, The Incredibles, on both Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, which has the Metascore. And so on Metascore, it has a score of 90, and then on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a Tomato Meter score of 97. So let's just pull up our calculator here and say 90 plus 97. And then that gives us the summation that we're going to do. And then we'll divide that by 2, which is 93.5. And then we'll divide that by 10 to get our scaled score. So we would expect to get a result of 9.35 from our program if it's working correctly. So let's go ahead and go back in here to Eclipse and run this program. So first we need to save it, and then we will build it. So during the build phase, we're doing the compiling and the linking operations. It doesn't look like we have any problems, so let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so if we look down here at the console, we'll see the prompt of what is the name of the movie. So the name of our movie is The Incredibles. So we'll type that in, hit enter, and then it says what is the Metascore rating for The Incredibles. So the Metascore rating was 90. So type that in and hit enter. And then we have what is the tomato meter rating for The Incredibles. So that was 97. And then we'll hit enter. So it looks like for our program, it says our calculated average on a 10-point scale for The Incredibles is 9. And then it has a dot there. And that's actually the period. It's not even representative of a decimal point. It's just the period that ended our sentence here. So it's not exactly what we were expecting. We were expecting to get 9.35. So let's go back and look at our program where we were actually calculating the average and rescaling the average. So what you'll notice here, if we look at this closely, we have a data type over here on the left-hand side of this assignment operation of an int. So we're saying that the average is an int data type. And what do we know about int data types? Well, those are representative of integers, so they do not store fractional parts. So if we calculate an average here, and we know that the average can have a fractional part, if we were to take some set of numbers and divide them by some other number, we can end up with a fractional part. We're losing that. That's being truncated or lost whenever we store it to this variable over here because it's not capable of storing a fractional part. So what we can do is change this particular data type to being a data type that can preserve or save a fractional part. So one of the types that we looked at that can do that is the double. So let's change this to double. And let's also do the same thing here for rescale average, because we need to be able to preserve it there. Because if you preserve it here and then you go and divide by 10 on this next line and then store it back into an integer value, you're going to lose whatever fractional part you had again. All right, so let's go ahead and save this, and we'll build it again, and then we'll run it again. All right, so let's go back through and we'll type in the name being The Incredibles. The Metascore rating again was 90, and the tomato meter for The Incredibles was 97. So this time it says our calculated average on the 10-point scale for The Incredibles is 9.3. So still not the 9.35 that we were expecting. So something else is going on. And what's going on is if we look at this line of code here, we have Metascore plus tomato meter divided by 2. Well, that looks like, it should give us an average that has a fractional part. But something subtle is going on behind the scenes, or maybe not so subtle if you actually understand it. So Metascore is an integer value because we typed in 90. Tomato meter was also an integer value since we specified that both of those were integer values. It was 97. And whenever we add those together, it's also going to be resulting in an integer value. And this 2 here is an integer literal. So whenever we perform this division here, what's going on is it's performing what we call integer division, since we have an integer both in the dividend and the divisor. So the result is also going to be an integer. That's just what it is. So the way that we need to change this is that we can make either the dividend a double or the divisor a double. It really doesn't matter which one, because if one's a double, then the operation that it will do will actually preserve the fractional part. So what we can do is actually cast maybe the value here, Metascore plus tomato meter, to be a double value. And the way we can go about casting is just doing an open paren double close paren. So what this effectively is saying is, for this particular operation, make this stuff here to be of type double. So whenever we have a double here and a double, or excuse me, an int here, it will automatically do a division operation so that it preserves the fractional part. So we can see that that works. Let's save this, click on the build button, and then we'll run our program again. And this time the name of the movie once again is going to be The Incredibles. And then we have the Metascore rating, which was 90, and the tomato meter rating, which was 97. So our calculated average on a 10-point scale for The Incredibles is 9.35. So we get the expected result this time. Now I did say that we could have also made this 2 value a double. And one of the easiest ways to make this 2 value a double is to just do .0. So the decimal point 0. So this makes this a double literal. Anytime in our program where we have a value and it has a decimal point, it's automatically seen as a double value. So if you wanted to, you could get rid of this. It doesn't matter that it's there, but we could get rid of that. And so you have a double here, and you have an int here. And since you have an int and a double, it's going to automatically promote this to being a double and perform double division so that we have a fractional part. So let's go ahead and save that, build it, and then run it. All right, so again, the name is Incredibles. The Metascore rating is 90, and the tomato meter score is 97. And so again, we get the same exact result. We get 9.35. So that was our expected result. All right, so we've covered a lot of things in this program here. We've looked at devising an algorithm, writing pseudocode, the idea behind comments, type conversion, also integer division, casting, so being able to cast a particular value to another value, and we'll probably talk more about casting in other programs. So we've seen a lot, and we'll do more in our next program.